Hi everyone, this is Tigor. I worked in the video game industry for over 20 years, mostly leading tech teams and projects. In this video, I will discuss the top 10 reasons why games get delayed. We keep hearing of anticipated games moving their launch dates. On occasions, the company will explain why, but what is said publicly is rarely the full story. The top 6 reasons are some of the biggest problems plaguing the video game industry. Every game suffers from at least one, but often all 6 of them. Most games change their dates frequently. The public announcements are only made after a major push has occurred and the company agrees with the team's recommendation. Internally, teams continue to update their forecasts without reporting up to the company and to the public. The number 10 reason: conflicting projects. Companies with multiple projects in development avoid eating into their own sales. As a countermeasure, they spread their launch windows throughout the year. It also separates how much money they need to spend each quarter out of their marketing budgets. Smaller game companies and publishers often have few members of their marketing team. With limited resources and time, they are unable to devote the proper effort to create marketing materials for multiple games. The number 9 reason: loss of key staff. In some cases, members of the development team in key roles leave the company or are no longer able to work for personal reasons. These unplanned situations may prevent the dev team from completing the game on time. Small companies usually don't have extra people they can pull in at the last minute to cover these gaps. The number 8 reason: avoiding juggernauts. The last thing a game developer wants to do is launch their new first-person shooter game the same day as the latest Call of Duty. Dates will push out to avoid a direct comparison between their game and a large competitor's game. They will either try to get out earlier to benefit from the juggernauts hype, or they will push their date far enough to avoid direct comparisons. Years ago, November was the biggest month for games to ship. Over time, games started releasing in October and then September to get into stores before the holiday shopping season and to avoid competing against the AAA titles. More recently, games started pushing themselves out of the holiday timeframe entirely by setting their ship dates in the first quarter of the following year. From my experience, most of those games were simply not ready and would never have made it out in time for Christmas. The number 7 reason: hiring the wrong people. Many game delays stem from the team's composition. Smaller companies tend to be made up of relatively junior staff. It is much cheaper to hire someone directly out of college than it is to hire seasoned professionals. That is not to say that dev teams shouldn't have junior staff. I prefer working with people who have a wide range of skills and experience. It can be difficult for small companies to hire specialists like rendering engineers and technical artists. People who can successfully fill these roles are in short supply and high demand in the games industry. New companies are often not aware that they need these roles on their team until they get near the end of the project. By that point, they realize they did not plan appropriately or that their game does not look unique enough to stand out against competing titles. We've all played games built on Unreal Engine that simply look the same. The number 6 reason: feature creep. Feature creep manifests when new features are added or existing features are expanded while the game is being built. Everyone thinks they know how to make the game better. The design, publisher, marketing, and management teams all believe they have the silver bullet. These ideas come from playing games that come out while the game is in development, feedback from early testing, or when new hardware features are released. Feature creep is almost impossible to avoid. Producers who understand that all features come with a price can take control of feature creep. If a new feature will take a month for a programmer to implement, they need to dig into the schedule and remove the equivalent workload from another feature that same engineer is scheduled to work on. Unfortunately, this rarely happens because game developers do not like cutting or scaling back on features. Most teams also have a hard time saying no to feedback that may improve the game without taking into account the full impact of those choices. Some new features come directly from the game publisher. Publishers frequently mandate additions to a game near the end of the project. A common example is a publisher who hires the developer to make a game for the latest Xbox or PlayStation platforms. Later, they add more platforms to increase the potential sales in the middle or near the end of the dev cycle. Small companies who are desperate to make payroll rarely communicate the impact of these mandates, resulting in more delays. This is one reason why some games will ship on the latest hardware first, followed by the older platforms months later. The number 5 reason: technical debt. Decisions made by the team early in the dev process can drastically affect when the game is able to ship. Which game engine to use is the biggest decision the programmers make. Most teams will choose either Unreal Engine or Unity. Unity is great for small games and mobile titles. Unreal is the industry standard for large, fully featured games. I've watched games start on Unity and either switch engines in the middle of development, or the team slogs through getting a large game working well enough to get it out the door. Choosing a genre that the team is not experienced building is another decision that has lasting consequences. Many game developers would love to make a fun first-person shooter or an action role-playing game. However, they set themselves up for failure when they choose to jump into these categories when they have a history of making sports, racing, puzzle, or music games. The last technical decision I will mention here is one that can corner a team in a position where they need to recreate major portions of the game. I've witnessed this happen with teams who thought they could build an open world game without understanding how to organize the data and streamline the code. When they finally listened, it was going to take more than a year to rebuild the game world. Games rarely ship if they get caught in this situation. The number 4 reason: low frame rates. Most dev teams procrastinate analyzing and improving the game's frame rate until it is too late. They think they will have time to fix it later. Very few companies have tools early in development and give the content creators budgets to keep the game running near target performance throughout production. Many games are simply unplayable on any hardware other than high-end PCs until shortly before they release. One of my biggest pet peeves in game development is waiting to address game performance until the game is ready to be fully tested. The cost that piles up frequently burns out at least one person to the point of quitting. The number 3 reason: poor planning. This one falls on the entire game team, but is usually controlled by the producers and leads. Understanding how long a feature will actually take to implement in a bug-free way is not something most game developers can do. I generally believe task estimates of 1 or 2 days. The higher the time estimate, the larger the factor it is off by. For example, if a programmer tells me it will take 2 weeks to finish a feature, you can expect it to take at least twice that long. If the estimate is 2 months, the more likely scenario is 5 to 10 months. Like most of us, game developers simply overestimate their personal abilities, and it ends up costing the project. Producers typically own the schedules for the team. It is their responsibility to gather estimates, track progress, and know the individuals they work with. If they understand their team's strengths and weaknesses, they will know how much to pad each person's estimates based on historic data. When this is done well, dates are solidified and believable. The number 2 reason: too many bugs. Of the top 10 reasons why games get delayed, this one is the most obvious to players. The number of bugs in shipping games has continued to rise as more teams fall prey to the issues on this list. Game developers start projects off intending to make the most polished game they have ever built. Unfortunately, they are forced to keep more bugs in the game as their looming ship date approaches. To compensate, the developers keep lowering the bar for the type of bugs they are willing to ship. Some of those bugs will get addressed in a day one patch. Others get fixed in the first 2 months. The remaining bugs are never resolved. And the number one reason games get delayed is called feature complete. The final piece to the readiness equation is referred to as feature complete. Poor planning, scheduling, communication, and management mixed together with incomplete game designs and an unwillingness to scale back on features causes game teams to not have all features ready for testing when they need to be. As feature development continues to dig into bug fixing time, the number and severity of bugs that end up shipping significantly increases. I will go more in depth on how this has led the game industry to frequently updating games in a future video. That's it for my top 10 reasons why games get delayed. I know there are others I didn't mention in this video. Hopefully this has given you more insight into game development. Thanks everyone for taking the time to learn more about how games are created. If you have any questions or recommended topics for future videos, feel free to post them in the comments below. Thanks.